How's it going, folks? Another episode of the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast here tonight. A 4th of July edition. A lot of fireworks going off this past Sunday for AEW Forbidden Door. And a lot of fireworks going to go on this weekend for Money in the Bank, as well as Heatwave. Yes, Heatwave from NXT. Who would have thought NXT would be where it is right now? But aside from that, Jamal, let's just get into it right now. Jamal Giant Crab with me, just me and him going solo. No commercials, no stopping. The train just goes.
Got a train to catch. We got to go.
We got to go like the speed title, which we'll get into a little later on in the show. But Forbidden Door, AEW this past Sunday. Yes. Another 14-hour pay-per-view brought to you by Tony Khan on Bleacher Report. But no, we're going to take this time to not go over pretty much what happened or the pay-per-view itself. We'll take this time to look over AEW kind of as a balance sheet. Where are we with pluses and minuses coming out of Forbidden Door and then going into their next pay-per-view over at Wembley in September. So the number one thing, Jamal, is Will Ospreay and Shane Strickland. Now, we talked about it on this show a couple of times that we all, or for the most part, have seen or thought that Swerve was going to be a transitional champion, right? So that might not necessarily be a bad thing. But now rumor has it, according to the interwebs, that Ospreay wanted to put Swerve over because of the perception that Swerve is a transitional champion. And again, there's nothing wrong with being a transitional champion. That was Edge's essentially whole singles career. But hearing that and seeing the match, it was a great match. Is it as great as the internet's making it out to be? I don't personally think so, but that's just me. Now that we know that Swerve has beaten Ospreay, but in the back of our minds, we're still anticipating it's only a matter of time before Ospreay takes the title off of him anyway. Does it change the public perception of Shane Strickland's reign? Or is it still an AEW diversion tactic to say, hey, look at the birdie, nothing's going on here?
Well, I think there's two things with this. Definitely two, possibly three. The first thing is, how come no one has ever brought up the plight of the transitional champion when it wasn't the black, world heavyweight champion?
Right.
Why does this matter? Because it's Swerve. That's number one. And you guys, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think about that. Nobody said anything about Moxley being a transitional champion or an interim champion. Actually was. That was more on the storyline. That was more of the confusion. That was more on, well, is Punk healthy and not? Nobody seems to have that concern about the merits of being a transitional champion. Went back then, but what a difference a couple years makes. So that's number one. The fact that it's a question is the question. Number two, the rumor is, of course, is that Ospreay, as everyone heard the rumors, was that, hey, I don't need to be champion right now. Swerve can go over. That will help him, cement his legacy as champion. And I think that's great. Good on Ospreay for being a team player. Good on him for, seeing the bigger picture in that does Swerve losing the title hurts him more than Ospreay winning it? Because Ospreay already a champion. He's the the international champion. So Ospreay 2 belts, does that need to happen? Well, it definitely doesn't need to happen now, but it doesn't necessarily need to happen at all, to be honest with you. Especially since Orange Cassidy has kind of cemented the international championship as the workhorse belt, the TNT title plus, if you want. And hell, I'll do you the HBO Max title, if we want to make it a little bit bigger than it actually is. So, since that is the case, and since Ospreay doesn't need the belt, the question now gets flipped in. It's like, well, since Ospreay passed on the opportunity, what does that actually say about the title? Well, he doesn't need it right now. Well, he doesn't need it right now because he knows he can get it whenever he wants. Does that devalue Swerve as a champion? And of course, a lot of these questions are coming directly at Swerve. It's interesting that we're not raising these questions about anybody, including Chris Jericho, that's been AEW champion. or any champion in AEW. Hey, keep the title warm because I can't wait for this person to come back. The last time we said that about a champion in AEW was Jade when she was waiting for Chris Statlander to come back.
Yes.
To give her the belt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's racist, but if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and calls me a dirty slur like a duck, then it might, I don't know.
It might be one. You never know.
Yeah. Who knows? But in all seriousness, though, I do respect Ospreay's resolve to be a team player. I do think that people find ways to undermine the credibility of Swerve Strickland. You can't undermine his talent. You can't undermine his ability to brand himself. And yet here we are questioning the merits of his championship. I mean, damn. Just if you feel the way, put it out there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Are we questioning him as the talent, or are we questioning the booking of his championship reign? Because like we just said, his talent is impeccable. His charisma is off the charts.
Sure.
But ever since he's been champion, at least in my viewpoint, it's never felt like he was the main event. Like you said, he's keeping the belt warm, particularly for someone else or potentially for somebody else. It reminds me of when CM Punk won the WWE Championship and had the 400 some odd day reign where he wasn't main eventing pay-per-views, even though he was the champion.
Right.
And it kind of devalued the reign no matter how long it was. So for me to see, and I was the one on the show that brought it up to say, hey, I just think Swerve is a transitional champion. And it's not about him. It's about who they booked against him. And then we talked about his feud with Adam Page and the blood licking. And like, it was a moment, but it wasn't the match. So now with Ospreay, the match was great according to the internet. It was Indy 5000 if you're one of those indie fans that I was back in 2017, 2018. But the entire reign itself, I've often felt that there's something missing. And what I believe is there needs to be a heel, and I know who the heel is, and I'll bring it up if we have to later. He needs a heel that's going to get under his skin, that the audience can rally behind Swerve, that's so detestable. I want you to think Hunter Booker T. So detestable that the crowd has no choice but to be behind Swerve no matter who he goes against. And there's one person in particular, and again, we'll talk about it later when we go over the state of AEW, that can do that. But right now, it's not Ospreay, because essentially you had two faces going against each other in the main event of Forbidden Door. And the only reason why it's at Forbidden Door was because Ospreay used to be part of New Japan and makes it easier to digest. Oh, look, he's been more at New Japan than AEW. He's got the family with him. Okay. But for Swerve, I've never seen since the Punk days a backseat champion in their own promotion. And it irks me. And I don't know if it's the booking, Tony Khan, EVPs, whomever is back there writing the Vince Russo-esque scripts. Can we give Shane Strickland something to do other than indie pop flavor of the week?
The short answer is no. And the reason why is because the top of the card at AEW is full. It's stacked with a lot of people that there's too much parity, so nobody kind of stands out. Because it's not that Swerve is bad or that Ospreay is better or anything like that. It's that when you have Swerve in his prime, you have Ospreay in his prime, you have Danielson, who is, taking a victory lap, but still he's putting out his best work in years. And then you do have, other guys, because it's Forbidden Door season. You have a lot of those guys from Japan that you haven't seen in a while. So that's why for me, it's always been like, damn it, this is where Ricky Starks fits in. Damn it, this is where Keith Lee fits in. damn it, this is where these young guys fit in, so that we can kind of change the guard a little bit, and yet Chris Jericho's a champion somehow, and yet we're talking about Swerve being a backseat champion when he is the champion. So the short answer to your question is yes, all of the above. The booking hasn't really been. I don't think it's been concrete enough for Swerve to stand out. Not in I can book this 6 months down the road and I know everything because the book is predictable. Just in is this the match that I need to see? And for a lot of people, based on name alone, Swerve versus Ospreay is a huge yes. For me, it's not necessarily a yes, but there are other things on the card that are a yes. But that's part of the benefit of having a 15-match card on a 5.5 hour long pay-per-view.
Literally a 15-match card, yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's booking it like it's a no-limit CD where you have 25 tracks on an album and they're using all 120 minutes of the 120 minutes of the disc. So it's a whole thing. But that's also Swerve itself, and this is just me personally, I don't really feel his character. I don't really know what it is. And he has the same issue that I have with a lot of guys at the top of the card with AEW, other than saying that you're the best and that you have accolades from promotions that I don't watch. Why do I need to watch you? Will Ospreay is the best in the world. Okay, cool. Well, Bryan Danielson is the best in the world. Okay, cool. Swerve's literally the champion, so he's the best in the world. Okay, cool. Why do I need to watch any of those guys? And they kind of all cancel each other out. There's, we talked about this, kind of in jest a while ago, where the Bucks are EVPs. They brought in Okada as a chairman. He's on the
Sassy
board.
Okada. I love Sassy Okada.
I like Sassy Okada, but sure. Mercedes is the CEO. Swerve is a mogul. Stokely's super manager, to the stars. They are all gimmicks of the same river.
Yes.
And even still, they lost Jade, and then they picked up Mercedes. Fucking Toni Storm is a literal, movie star, living her golden years. So again, same river, different flavor. I want something a little bit more different. Max Friedman is literally rich. Okay, we get it. So just give me something that's a little bit different than I'm the big bad wolf and I run shit.
Yeah.
You have like legit 6 or 7 people saying that. So I think it all kind of cancels each other's out, because if you're not a boss or a CEO, you're the best wrestler in the world.
And that's it. It's only 2 things.
Yeah, exactly. So you have 3 other people saying that they're the best of the world, pound for pound, and they should be champion, and by God, they will. Okay. We'll get in that group. So that's why people like Willow stand out, because she's not saying that she's the best. She's not saying that she's a boss or a CEO.
She's happy to be here.
She's literally happy to be here and grateful, and that's great. But also, if you piss her off, you're going to get an elbow. It is, so she stands out. Statlander was an alien. Now she's just from Long Island and has Stokely as her mouthpiece.
Yeah.
I didn't like the alien gimmick, but it stood out. So that's kind of what it is. We're seeing the layers kind of separate and coagulate into these different, sections. And it's a lot of sameness, a lot of redundancy. And I need a bit more separation between people, no matter the placement of the card. Right. I just like, if I point to a guy and say like, okay, that's Samoa Joe. What does he do? Well, he's Samoan and his name is Joseph. Okay. And then, of course, he's the only Samoa Joe there. He's a great promo guy, badass, brawler and stuff like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you got to dig below this, you got to dig a little bit deeper to find out what sets him out. And that's kind of the thing in general, but we don't really have that separation, which makes a guy like Swerve feel, in spite of the match that they have, where it's just like they're missing something. And it's not just me saying that. Check the ratings.
And it goes to what I just said too about him not having a foil that's so detestable that we have no choice but to root for Swerve. So
Right.
that vein of the male roster who appeared on the main card of Forbidden Door, all right?
Mm-hmm.
The Elite, the Acclaimed. Aside from Okada, which is not, he needs to, still build his character up in AEW, even though we know it's, millionaire Bucks Okada.
Sure.
Okay. The Acclaimed, Billy Gunn, Tanahashi. No. Bryan Danielson has said he doesn't want the title. He has said out loud, I just want to wrestle. I just want to put on wrestling matches. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Shingo Takagi, again, New Japan. Zack Sabre Jr., Orange Cassidy. No one's going to hate Orange Cassidy. If you put Orange Cassidy against Shane Strickland, Swerve Strickland, it's going to be that Swerve's the heel. And maybe that's what you need to do if the face run fails. Okay. Samoa Joe, he beat Joe for the title. Hook ain't ready. Shibata, he's in the paywall of honor and just pops up and maybe takes the pin every so often.
Mm-hmm.
Jericho, hell no. Keep Jericho, Big Bill away from Swerve Strickland at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I like the former W. Morrissey. I liked him when he was Big Cass. But because now he's stuck to Jericho as his new Enzo, he's not ready for that. Okay, great. Moving on. Then we can go to Moxley and Naito. So again, Naito, New Japan, spot appearances. Moxley doesn't really need the title. He could kind of do what he wants. He's like you said, he's the workhorse he's been the workhorse of AEW. So he pretty much can tell Tony, hey, if you need me to help.
To be fair, he's focused a little bit more on Japan stuff too. So.
On New Japan. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and now we can get to the ladder match. Lio Rush, of course, Lio Rush. Mark Briscoe's still suited to what he does. Dante Martin, no. El Fantasmo, no. Takeshita could be, but he's not there yet. Who are we left with? The one person who can make everyone in AEW hate him that's not named MJF. And that is Jack Perry. If you turn into the streak or the skid of Jack Perry being everybody's scapegoat and he's an asshole. He's Shawn Michaels circa 1994, where we hated his guts. Then you could possibly get Shane Strickland, Swerve Strickland, the babyface overcoming the heel that we all can't stand. And then we can have a fixer-upper of Triple H, Booker T from Mania all those years back. I think he's the only one on the roster right now as it's currently constituted that can make you hate him just for existing. And because Shane's going to whoop his ass, or to borrow the phrase, whoop that trick, we're going to say, okay, now we're going to throw everything behind Strickland because we can't stand Jack Perry. Thoughts?
I would have said Perry if guys like Roderick Strong or Cole or what's his face from that's in the group with the guy the dirty Seth Rollins. I can't think of his name. He's in the group with Juice Robinson. Jay White.
Yes. See, he wasn't even on the card. He wasn't even on the card this week.
Right. So because of, you have guys like that I think White's been hideously underused also.
Yes, he has.
Now granted, they had to pivot because Robinson got hurt a little bit, but Jay White was that guy that when he came in and made a big splash and then kind of settled to like the upper middle of the pack. I think that White could be that guy at the top. I'm not convinced that Jack Perry is hateable enough to do that. I think if we put the parameters that you just stated, and you're looking for that person, and again, there is a such thing as bad heat, but I think the only person that's on the roster now is Chris Jericho. The internet itself and Khan books for Reddit,
he does.
They would absolutely get their pitchforks and their tiki torches and all their other paraphernalia and 100% burn that shit to the ground if Jericho weasels his way back into the championship picture. I'm not saying that he physically can't do it, because I think he does. The tires aren't bald yet, but they're getting there. I just think a lot of what Jericho has to offer, he thinks that he's, this guy on the mic and this, this character and stuff like that. He thinks that he's still the lion tamer and that, no. Jericho,
all that stuff.
Yeah, right. I think that, Jericho is Mick Jagger of AEW, of wrestling. Hell of a career. Accomplished so much. He's 114 years old and looks it.
Yes, he is.
So, take your flowers and go before we give them to you at your funeral. But I think that Jericho's in that spot right now, while he still has some semblance of fumes in the tank.
Yeah. Where
you kind of go, I literally hate this guy. And I would rather root for David Duke over Chris Jericho.
But is
that bad?
Let me ask this question. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to borrow a phrase from the old school Attitude Era and say, is this X-Pac heat?
This is that X-Pac
heat. This is go away heat. This isn't I hate you. Unless Chris Jericho mentions something about January 6th, everything he brings to the table will be X-Pac heat, go away. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if we're going to go that way, annoying shit heel that we want to see stomped out, I do think Jack Perry fits that mold. He comes across as whiny,
true,
bitchy.
But Jericho can't be killed, only contained.
So it's a Pokemon evolution. We got Jack Perry, and then he evolves into Chris Jericho. Might as well make it a triple threat.
I mean, if you get him like a water stone or something like that, he needs a little bit of a boost. But he needs something. But the idea is that, like, to that point of, and even still, for what we say is that, hey, we need a guy that's going to either make Swerve a babyface, which of course leads to the question: why are we still trying to determine where Swerve fits in?
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the champion. Alignment? We know what the gimmick is. Whether you like it or not, it's on you, but we know what the gimmick is, and he's a boss and a mogul and a CEO and all that good stuff. Good for him. Support small black businesses, sure. I'm down. But is he a heel or a face? Is he a tweener? I don't think he fits into any of those boxes and that's unfortunate because I don't know why I should feel something about him. If you put on a good match, great. But a lot of guys put on great matches. I watch Dark more than Dynamite. So it's not a matter of a good match can't save you in AEW. It can't. That's not how that works. So you need something a little bit more. And it's really ironic that it's, in a WWE way where they put substance over quality in this terms of the wrestling side of things. A lot of people with great gimmicks and they were bad wrestlers. In AEW, they have a lot of great talent that have very mediocre, middle-of-the-road gimmicks. So do they need to switch that? Maybe, maybe not. But if they want to establish as a company their own brand, their own synergy in their own way, they really kind of got to get out of that where they're either going to put on 5-star matches and break the scale every single time, or become, more interested in dynamic gimmicks. And the last time we saw that, Jade left with WWE. So as far as Swerve goes, I think you're absolutely right. He kind of needs that like ungodly foil to not necessarily legitimize him, but give me a reason to make him want the belt.
Yes. Give me a reason. Exactly.
That could be Jack Perry. But I think that if Chris Jericho and he assembles his goons under the learning tree, and his final exam, because he's doing the learning tree gimmick, is the World Heavyweight Championship at wherever the hell. end of the year. Full Gear, I guess, in November. That could be Jericho's retirement match. I mean, obviously, every match could be Jericho's retirement match, but
from a literal perspective, yes, more so than
but that was like actually Full Gear, and they build it after Wembley. They build it after Labor Day, and then they go, "I'm going to teach you the greatest lesson of all. If I lose the Swerve, I will retire." And that way, you have half the internet, Jericho's retirement match. And whether they smudge the ending or he beats him clean or whatever, Jericho wins his retirement match. People would be pissed because Jericho didn't just beat Swerve, he beat the internet. Now you have a bona fide heel. Now I have a reason to hate. Now I have a reason to root for Swerve because he got screwed out of the title or whatever.
But you only care about him because he lost the title, not because he has the title.
This whole conversation has been establishing Swerve as a person and giving me a reason to care about him. Well, if I don't care about his character, I got to latch on to something, and that something is the belt.
Yeah.
So to that point, I would say that, it doesn't have to be Jericho, but as of right now, because I don't know exactly who's hurt, who's coming in, who's doing this, who's doing that, but I can definitely think of a guy that would be instant red hot. We got to pack this dude up and get him out of here. It would be Jericho. I mean, he's already getting "please retire" chants, from a smattering of the crowd. Could you imagine that audience when he wins the title, in his retirement
after
match?
Putting up his career? Yeah.
Now, and again, as we started off talking about transitional champions, he doesn't have to carry it long. His retirement match was that one match.
Right.
He won it.
He could just win that and then lose it on the next Dynamite.
He could he could lose it on the next Dynamite. He could lose it at Revolution. But whatever it is that that is what you work towards. That's what you built to. That's what you paid off. And people are pissed. How long will the reign of Jericho last? And people say that in that right. Hopefully. But people say that in that phrase, in that, oh my God, we're still under the thumb of Jericho, considering that he's not even a real champion. He's the FTW champion or something like that.
I was going to say, do we recognize that title at this point? Like, no,
we do when it's convenient,
Okay. When it involves Taz,
right?
We recognize it. Yes.
So that's the thing. You say Jack Perry, I understand, and the only reason why I don't say like Sammy Guevara or something like that is because that's just too obvious, and he hasn't been there. Hell, who knows if he'll even come back? I don't know where he is.
Dad?
I don't know where he is or where he's been. So
okay,
but maybe he's still on paternity leave. But I think the kid's like 20 now, so who knows?
20 months, yeah.
I don't know. But the idea is, the only person as of right now, and of course, in the comments, do let us know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Please.
Is there a bigger heel than Jericho? Because Swerve as his character, he's not a face or a heel. He's just a guy. He's ambitious, and that ambitious is either good or bad, depending on where you fall on the issue. But now it's just kind of like, now we're talking about definitive reasons, and I think Jericho could make you hate the Pope.
Wow. Okay, that made me think for 2 seconds. Like, did I hate? Yeah, I can see that. He would find a way to get. To his credit, he will find a way to make us hate him, and he will, like I said, steer into the skid. He is capable of doing that. But the reason why I say Jack Perry, it's because it's not a retread. It's one of the pillars, right? One of the old pillars of AEW, supposedly, who's now the scapegoat, who's the bad guy, who's the one we're supposed to hate because he's banging the hottest chick in the locker room, to quote what he was saying. What better way than to beat the crap out of the sniveling a-hole heel to solidify Swerve's reign? But that brings up another question. Is Swerve the most over champion in his own company? And I will tell you no. And I will say the most over champion in the company is Tony Storm. So with that logic, with that thought process, should we be shining a bigger light aside from, and we'll get to Mercedes, aside from Mercedes and I'm going to be the belt collector, aside from that, Toni Storm, is she someone or the women's division worth, like, because now we're all about the WNBA now as a society, right? So we're all about women's sports now, and that's not the World Cup of soccer.
Now.
Should she be featured more now that we're riding this wave of female athletes to be a bigger star, or at least be neck and neck promotion-wise with Swerve?
Well, let me just say, since we are talking about women's wrestling, let's just take a moment of quiet reflection to thank Stephanie McMahon for inventing women's wrestling in 2006. Hallowed be her name. So there's that. But the short answer to your question is, I think that they've actually done a pretty damn good job of keeping up with Toni Storm, keeping her in a position that she is seen and visible, building storylines and characters, giving them the appropriate treatment that it deserves. So kudos to them for that. Not because she's a woman, just because they didn't drop the ball. Same thing with Mercedes. I think Mercedes's reign so far, not reign, but her introduction into AEW has been a bit slow, dare I say flat. And I think a lot of it is because she suffers from the same plight that Swerve does, is that I don't know why I should cheer for you.
I'm a mogul. I'm a boss. I run the NLM.
Right. So, I mean, so you can let her be your Amway champion if you want, but I don't necessarily want to root for Temu as a brand. I don't necessarily need to want to root for that. So, but with Toni Storm, they've weaved the history in. With Mina Shirakawa, they've intersected that with her president in AEW, and then of course, Toni Storm did something different. What was she when she was with the Outcast? Who were they? Well, we were just rejected. But wait a minute.
Okay.
But I got a job. I mean, my title at work isn't the former this, and this from my previous jobs. My title is what it is right now. It's not even future whatever I'm going to be down the road when I get fired from this job. So for you to say, hey, we're the Outcast and we're going to come in and make it. Well, we saw that already. Unless you're going to get Perry Saturn to go in
with Moppy
and Dean Malenko and those guys, to go ahead and lead the invasion. That's not the same thing, and that fell flat. So I do think that Toni Storm did something unique, and then they build on it. She went full on Joan Crawford and did it well. And did it well, and then they laid into it with the black and white transitions, the split screens and stuff like that. Giving Luther something to do. God bless that man. That the whole buildup has been fantastic, and that's probably like one of the 2 or 3 matches that I actually was interested in about Forbidden Door, because I wanted to see what's going to happen next. Swerve versus Ospreay for the title still felt like an exhibition match. Not because it didn't have build up, and not because the match was going to be great or whatever, but it still had this air of transitional champion. Gives Ospreay the belt, they'll meet down the line, but Ospreay's got to go into Wembley as a champion. And now that he isn't, the rumors or the story immediately comes out that Ospreay said, well, the internet's talking, so let's do something else.
Right. Let's switch it up.
Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic.
It is. And I'm looking right now, the Toni Storm Mina Shirakawa match got the second lowest amount of time on the pay-per-view by 1.5 minutes. So the fact that we're talking about, and I brought it up, I would say, should Toni Storm be in a more prevalent position, or the women's division as a whole be in a more prevalent position than what we were getting? And the thing I now that we're thinking about discussing it, it's a disservice to Toni Storm when it's not even about the title. It's about the love triangle of her, Mariah May, and Mina Shirakawa to get the 18 to 43 dynamic to be like, are they all going to kiss? What's going to happen? Ooh, as opposed to, are they putting on a good wrestling match? And yes, the fan service did happen, guys. I hope you guys are alive. You didn't faint when you saw the triple kiss. Good for y'all. Didn't care. But because of Stephanie McMahon, we often talk about the women's revolution. Making a championship storyline, not about, as we talked about earlier, about, okay, I'm the best. Well, I'm a boss. Yeah, they found a different wrinkle to do it, but it was still a trope nonetheless. Like, we're battling for the affections of who our BFF is.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I mean, women's storylines and being best friends. Right. Yeah, women's storylines and being best friends. That is a duo unlike any other. And that's, of course, the great trope. However, because of the context behind it, I'll let it slide. Yes, it is your stereotypical, hey, we're women. And even though we have our differences, we used to be friends. Because I like you and you like me. And things happen. We're not friends anymore. Let's fight about it because stuff. Like, okay. But contextually, it does make sense because of the fact that it's Forbidden Door. It ties in with Japan. It ties in with the present. It ties in with the future. And the Toni Storm that used to be in New Japan isn't that Toni Storm anymore. She's now timeless. So, which of course is a double entendre because we're talking about 3 different timelines that she's dealing with, the past, the present, and the future. So it's I think from all of that, it's well done. And yes, you could argue that the 11 plus minutes that they gave her fireworks. I swear to God. So this is, I don't know if you heard that in the background.
I did, yes.
Yeah. But this is what happens when you live in an area that allows fireworks. The sun has not even set yet. And this will be my hell for the next 3 months. They don't stop shooting fireworks here until August, September. But I'll power through and then mute myself before these heathens get hands on more explosives. Good on Toni Storm, but I think in 11 minutes, I didn't see the match to say it, but I don't think that a match time is indicative of the quality. If they did what they needed to do with the time that they have, then all's well that ends well. I would rather see a good 11-minute match than a tedious 25-minute championship match, or let alone a 60-minute match that with a 35-minute story. So I'm willing to give credence to the fact that they can tell the story that they need to tell in the time that they need to tell it.
So then my question would be then, if we're going to talk about the women's division as a whole, going to Mercedes Moné really quick, we'll transition there with her new gimmick being the belt collector of all these different promotions. You said it was flat. I said it's flopped. So is it a good thing that it's still kind of to be seen, to be determined whether or not she's a good fit still for AEW? Because I know she just wants to wrestle, right? She wants to wrestle everywhere. And AEW gives her that flexibility to do so, as well as do the acting gigs when they do come up.
Sure.
But for me and for you, her AEW tenure has been a little lackluster. And even though the match she had was good at Forbidden Door, because I did watch the women's matches, even though I didn't watch the entire pay-per-view.
Sure.
You know, Stephanie Vaquer and her put on a banger of a match, but we were more interested with the "fuck Boston" chants going on in the audience during the match, more so than Mercedes winning. And then the hype is now about not even Mercedes winning, it's, oh, the dentist is back. Oh, by the way, did you know she's a dentist? Because we're going to remind you, she's a dentist. What? But she's back. Yeah, right? Who knew that she was a dentist with, DMD in it? But apparently now she's going to drill some cavities into, Mercedes' smile, what have you, whatever. It's still not about Mercedes. It's not about Britt Baker. It's not about your mid-card women's champion who wants to wrestle. And maybe that's a good thing, because now with Danielson, like I said earlier, Danielson just wants to put on good matches. He doesn't care for the title. Now, if that's the case, if that's what Mercedes wants to do, then let her drop the belt to Baker, and then she could just put on 40-minute classics with whomever she wants.
Right. But the difference between Swerve and Mercedes is that we're searching for that person that will give Swerve that lifelong feud that ties them together, mortally.
Sure.
Bret Hart,
Shawn, Bret and
and
Austin.
Shawn, Austin, sure. Mankind, The Rock, like these are the things that's what we're looking for. With Britt Baker coming back and Mercedes being there, it's not that I know who I'm going to root for. I know why I'm going to root for them. And whether I don't want Mercedes as a double champion because of the fact that her reign has been flat and her time has been flat in AEW, then I'm going to root for Britt Baker. That's going to give this storyline whatever they have. I'm interested now. Whether I want to root for the boss because I'm tired of Britt Baker jumping the line, because how does she come in and interrupt Mercedes when there are people not necessarily more qualified, but definitely more interesting than Britt Baker that could come through and get a shot at the title anyway? How dare she come back? Where's Serena Deeb? Where's the wrestling? Where's Leyla Hirsch? Where's Athena? I know she's injured, but I'm just saying, like, where are these matches down the line that we really could see that test Mercedes medal? And then, oh no, you get Britt Baker crowd pops. Okay. So no matter how you feel, I have a reason to feel. And I don't have that reason to feel about Swerve. And that's kind of what we're searching for. And that's, so with Mercedes, that's not her fault, but it is a byproduct of her middle of the roadness that now the tide has turned. And hopefully, now granted, this is the catch-22, you're asking for emotional content out of the Doctor. And I can't think from a
can't emote. Mm-hmm.
I can't think from a wrestling standpoint or from a promo standpoint that two worst people on the roster would come and actually save and bring the emotional content to a high-profile feud. But the sadist in me makes this interesting to see how this train stays on the tracks.
It's gonna wreck. Yeah, no, and I'm interested to see how cringe the promos are going to be. But again, that should not be the reason I want to see these two tangle, because to see how bad the promos are going to be.
But I'm a doctor.
I'm a dentist. I'm a boss. Okay. What else you got, ladies? Like,
okay.
And it's the same thing. We'll hold the men to the same thing where it's like, okay, like Strickland's a mogul.
Mm-hmm.
A mogul of what? Of Nana? Right. He's Nana's boss? Like, is that it?
Hey, he's a mogul.
Nana's Farnsworth Bentley.
Yeah, he has his hands into many different ventures and stuff.
Sure.
Thanks.
But over on AEW, I could see why sometimes they struggle in the ratings, because maybe, and y'all could tell me in the comments, aside from Mercedes' match being in Long Island and she's from Massachusetts, is she a heel? Is she a face? Is she a tweener? Like you were saying earlier about Swerve. Toni Storm, she's supposed to be a diva heel, but people love Toni Storm. So it's like, okay, are you a heel or are you one of those tweeners? She's more of a tweener than the other two are. And
yeah, I think that Toni Storm is a true tweener, but because she's so radically different than those in that top five, upper echelon of the women's bracket, the women's division, that it doesn't really matter. I'm rooting for her, not for her sensibilities or her loyalties or anything like that. I want to see what she does and only she does. And then, of course, there's some guys with their hands in their pants going, yeah, lesbians. But for me, I'm rooting for Toni Storm and the transformation. I'm really rooting for Luther, but I'm rooting for Toni Storm and the transformation of Toni Storm.
My man
now,
Luther
where she goes
That's
from
all
there.
I need to know.
Yeah, well, Luther's there. I'm watching. But it's still to the point of she's going to lose the belt. She has to lose the belt. And that can be fine, too. But it doesn't seem like such a detriment, because if Swerve loses the belt, then where does he go from here?
Right.
And that's kind of the thing.
6-man tag with Hook and Samoa Joe. That's what
he joins Chris Jericho in the learning tree.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I hope.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, how is it that the champion has more to lose than, and Ospreay actually is a champion too, but how is it that Ospreay has less to lose than Swerve, and Swerve has the better belt?
Right. Which goes to keep saying that I forgot that Ospreay is a champion, because he doesn't need a championship belt. He's Ospreay. Right. He's already an attraction. So, but the fact that you had Swerve go over, and it still did nothing for Swerve's cachet. So,
well,
and we talked about it.
I think it's going to take time. I think it's going to take time because of the fact that there's a lot of inherent bias against Swerve for obvious and not obvious reasons that people have not yet become accustomed to. But I also don't think. Now, granted, I didn't see the match with Ospreay, but I haven't heard of that instant classic, must-watch, 5-star. The audience melts down moment in AEW for Swerve, and you could argue that match with Adam Page was it. That was peak. That was peak Swerve in AEW.
Yeah, I can agree.
And if that is peak AEW, well, that was then. Where does he go from here? And that trajectory hasn't been up. Whereas Ospreay came in, did his thing, and the trajectory for him has been up. Which is why it feels that Swerve has more to lose than Ospreay, even though Ospreay has the lesser belt. So there you go. But we've been going on about this for actually quite longer than I thought we would. But I want to put a pin in that because before we get out of here, I do want to bring up NXT Heatwave very quickly.
Yes.
And of course the other question that that we talked about before we went live is so for Heatwave. Happening in Toronto at the Scotiabank Arena, part of Money in the Bank weekend. Let me just say, number one, I like the fact that NXT is being incorporated in these bigger events. I want NXT to travel more, to tour more, bring NXT to the people, full stop. Mm-hmm. As far as the pay-per-view goes, nothing that I really need to see. Should be interesting. But I'm not exactly, running. If I were in Toronto for Money in the Bank, yeah, I would go. But if I have, I'll actually be in New York this weekend, so I have other things to do than the NXT pay-per-view. With that said, though, Roxanne Perez, how long will she be champion? I'm not sure. Not that she needs to leave NXT tomorrow, but if she did, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
And I think that she's kind of like at the end where she's like, okay, whenever you're ready. Yeah, whenever you're ready, you can go. But I'll obviously always root for Chase U, because
of course you will.
That's just because I want them to be the first white historically black college. So
they really are.
Really, I need that to happen. But really, I mean, the pay-per-view seems cool. It'll be interesting to see how the crowd responds to the 4-way for the main event. Trick Williams, Javon Evans, local guy Ethan Page from Hamilton, and then further down the road, Sean Spears from Niagara Falls. So, how will that Canadian crowd react to them? I think that'll be interesting to see. But then, I don't know what you think. But the pay-per-view feels kind of good, mid. But not.
It's okay. It's a good episode of NXT.
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking at. It's not a pay-per-view level.
Yeah,
but I think that's the thing is that with all the call-ups that we talked about in previous episodes here on Big Gold Belt podcast, just all the call-ups, the roster was a little depleted, so now the youngins have got to step up. So that's why you have someone like Lola Vice challenging for the women's title, right? That's why you have Kalani Jordan being the first women's North American champion going up against Sol Ruka. So you got to get the youngest to step up at some point. But my worry now is you're in Canada. You have two relatively young guys to the business in Evans and Williams against two Canadians who have had long storied careers in professional wrestling, in Ethan Page and Sean Spears. Do you have Ethan Page win the title? Because we know it's not Sean Spears. In Canada, do you have Ethan Page pinning Trick Williams or even pinning Javon Evans or a finger poke of doom where Sean Spears puts over Ethan Page or Canadian Maple Lock, I guess, if you want to go there? Would you pull that trigger for the Canadian pop or would you still have Trick go over?
I wish it were an elimination match instead of a fatal 4-way.
Yes.
I think elimination matches are much more fun. instead of a 4-man 75 false finish, multi-man match. But considering that it's not an elimination match, I don't see why Trick doesn't go over. I think Ethan Page and Shawn Spears get their shot, but really, I don't think that they're there to win the NXT title. They're there in the same vein as why Matt Hardy should be there in TNA. So,
yes,
good on them. Get your screen time. Make your money. But realistically, they're there as a name, not necessarily as a performer. And I don't have a problem with them, going out there and doing the good Canadian thing. But then again, Trick has got to come on with it. Unless this is Trick's swan song as well.
I would hope not. I would
hope not.
If I was the one booking this show, I would not have neither of the champs lose. I wouldn't have Roxanne lose. I wouldn't have Trick lose. I would have them lose the pay-per-view before SummerSlam and then have them called up the night after SummerSlam, if we're treating it as the internet calls it, hot WrestleMania. So I really do think that Roxanne is in a holding pattern because there is still no viable challengers for her title. They had to change her character because Cora Jade got injured. So she had to become an amalgamation of her and Cora. But Lola Vice, let me take out the MMA background. She's eye candy that can kind of throw some punches and kicks for a wrestling audience, right?
Sure.
Can we really take her seriously if she beats Roxanne as wrestling fans? If it would take gender out of it, if it was two guys who had this same situation, could we really believe that someone like Lola Vice was going to win this title and could be the champion?
Well, I mean, just flat out, I don't think that Lola Vice is a better wrestler.
No, she's not. It's a litmus test. Like you were saying before about Spears and Page, they're there as the litmus test for the two youngins to see what they can do in a crazy environment.
Right.
Lola already had her match with Natty, already had her match with Shayna. These are people that can walk you through the process of being a professional wrestler. You just happen to be in the women's division, right? So the transition from MMA fighter to professional wrestler. So now Roxanne is the prodigy, the pinnacle, whatever you want to call her, of NXT. If Lola could put on with Roxy or Roxanne a 10-minute, I'll say 10, 11 minutes of good work, then she's well on her way. I don't think she's ready, but it'll be a good litmus test. Now, the match I want to see is Obafemi and Wes Lee, because what do you do with either one of those two? Because Wes Lee is so lovable by the NXT universe that I fear that if he went up to the main roster, nobody would give a shit. Obafemi is this dominating Ron Simmons-y type, just mountain of a man, circa from 1992. Now Obafemi just is a mix between Mark Henry and I was gonna say Farouk, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like he's a man mountain, so he's obviously the next big thing. Who wins? Who loses? How do you do it? What is it going to be a schmaz ending? Like that's what I'm looking forward to, because if Wesley loses, he can't challenge for the North American title anymore. Well, does that elevate whoever loses that match? Do they jump the line against Trick Williams to be the next person up? Who's to say? But it's a very interesting episode of NXT that just happens to be a pay-per-view. Now, before we get out of here, you had something you wanted to talk about.
I do.
That is a little off the beaten path. And yeah, Money in the Bank's this weekend. Cool. Okay. But I like what you want to talk about before we end the show. So let's go there.
So Xavier Woods, he said, I saw an interview because everybody's doing press for Money in the Bank, which is this weekend. He said in an interview that he needs to win the WWE Speed title in order to cement his legacy in WWE. Now, if he feels that he needs to win the Speed title, okay, that's interesting. But the question is, now that we're talking about the legacy of Xavier Woods, and specifically Xavier Woods, not the New Day as a whole.
Yeah.
Based on what it is right now, is Xavier Woods a first ballot WWE Hall of Famer? Right. Not the New Day, just Woods. Right. And we had to look it up. Well, what does he do? You know, we know that he's like, you know, a 20-time 11-time champion between the Raw and SmackDown titles with Kofi, won the NXT title once, and has had a litany of moments. But that rap battle against the Usos doesn't make you a Hall of Famer.
No, it does not.
Good moment, not a Hall of Fame moment. The cereal box entrance at WrestleMania doesn't make you a Hall of Famer. So what specifically has Xavier Woods done as a singles wrestler? Well, as far as I know, he hasn't won a singles title. Do correct us if I'm wrong. You're the internet. You're going to do that anyway, but just let us know. Based on the fact that Woods himself has not won a singles title, that everything that he's done has come as a member of the New Day. And we're not arguing whether or not the New Day specifically will be in the WWE Hall of Fame. If anything, they're all going to go in before anyone goes in individually. Right. But as we're talking about the individual characteristics about Woods, Kofi's won the belt. Kofi's been an Intercontinental Champion and stuff like that. Kofi's has had a singles run and meaningful one. But for Xavier Woods, who has definitely been a cornerstone in WWE for more than a decade, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? Yes or no?
No. By himself, no. Because of what you've said, no. As a tag team person, as a tag team wrestler, as the New Day, like when the Four Horsemen went in together, sure. But by himself, no. But even if he wins the Speed title, I don't think that does anything to his legacy other than for his own personal check marks, bucket list to say, hey, I've been king of the ring. I've been the Speed champion. Has he won the 24/7 title? I don't think he did.
I don't think he has.
If they brought back the hardcore title, I feel like he would want to win that. He's the guy who wants to win all the random belts. That still doesn't make you a first ballot.
Right. And again, we said specifically first ballot is, you know, we definitely would say that Xavier Woods by himself is a Hall of Famer based on his work with the New Day. The New Day as a group, 100% Hall of Famers whenever they decide to hang it up. We will see them in a suit. We will see them, introduced by Mega Rand or somebody like that probably. But the idea is individually, it's interesting that he feels that he needs to win the Speed title instead of going on a singles run. Right. Now, of course, who is the WWE Speed champion? It's Andrade, the second champion ever. After Ricochet. But, Woods versus Andrade for the Speed title, that I guess. I guess. But it's interesting that's the title that he says that he needs. It's also interesting that he hasn't won a singles title by himself. I'm not counting King of the Ring as a title.
Right.
Yes. So it'd be interesting considering how many singles titles there are, and even in Saudi Arabia and the different trophies and all the good stuff. He hasn't won any of the singles ones. So to that point, I don't think the WWE Speed title is something that's going to cement his legacy. I think that's already done. But I also think that it's really kind of surprising that he hasn't won one by himself. And I kind of want to see that singles run before he goes.
I don't think, I'll say this, not even think. He's not, in my opinion, Kofi Mania was a thing. It was a happening. It was like the Yes movement, right?
Sure.
Big E, sure. Big meaty men slapping man meat, like he likes to say. So in WWE eyesight, that's a world heavyweight champion. So he's won the title. And I believe it was, I was going to call him Doc Hendricks. Michael Hayes said it in a documentary about Xavier Woods, is if he was 3 inches taller, he'd make some real money in this business. because of his charisma, because of his likability, and he's a good wrestler. But because he's allegedly 6'1", that's not good enough to be championship material within WWE. Now, I understand why, because if you and I woke up tomorrow and Xavier Woods was the WWE champion or the World Heavyweight champion, what would we think? We'd be like, oh, you're kidding, right? This isn't April 1st. I wouldn't even be excited. I would think it's a joke because he's been winning matches with the roll-up. He brought back the elbow. So he's king of old school, which I love. But he's not that dude. And I don't even think he wants to be that dude. Like we said earlier about Swerve Strickland. Swerve wants to be that dude. But I feel like AEW doesn't want him to do that. Whereas even if WWE said, Woods, beat Damian Priest, I'm good. I honestly think he would say he's good and doesn't need to do it because he's the only New Day member to not win a singles title. And maybe he's okay with that. But to your point and the original question, no, he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. And you guys can let us know in the comments if you disagree. Great career from Consequences Creed to what he is now. Love him. Student of the game, up, down, down. But not a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I want to get to Money in the Bank before we get out of here really quickly. Any last thoughts on that?
No, I was just going to say that I definitely hope that if he does win that belt, that does set him on a path to do other things. You got to start somewhere, and if somewhere it just happens to be on Twitter, then so be it. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we could call that the social media championship at this point, the speed title,
which makes sense for him.
Yes. So Money in the Bank, 5 matches. We talked about it earlier. We have the men's and the women's Money in the Banks. We have the 3 championship matches, actually. No, we don't have 3 championship matches. We only have 2. We only have Damian Priest versus Seth Rollins and Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker. And we have the 6-man tag against the New Bloodline versus the Super Friends of Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens. So the main title isn't being defended on the show, at least not at first. We don't know what the cash-in is going to look like. But the women's match is intriguing because it has Io, Chelsea Green, Lyra, who I really like. I like Lyra's work. Tiffany, who the Rocket was strapped on and it's not strapped on anymore. Zoe Stark, and Naomi. Now, if Chelsea Green won the briefcase, I would have a meltdown in all the best ways possible because I could see her cashing in and failing and then making her star power bigger by failing and throwing a temper tantrum in the ring because she failed the cash in. Right. The men's Money in the Bank, I would love for it to be Carmelo Hayes. I don't know why, but there's something about him, and I remember him as Christian Casanova. I didn't like him at first, but he's grown on me like moss, like seaweed. And now I like his work. So now we got Jey Uso, Carmelo, Andrade, the Speed Champion, Gable, LA Knight, who's feuding with Logan Paul, and Drew McIntyre. It looks like Drew's going to win this title and then cash in on Damian Priest. Like, okay, cool. To set up him versus Punk for the title eventually, probably at SummerSlam. My question to you is, with the way everything looks, with Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker being the other title match, is this pay-per-view just a really good episode of SmackDown versus Raw? Or is this a pay-per-view worthy 5 matches?
Well, I think, number one, I think quality over quantity. And I think the Money in the Bank ladder match itself is a spectacle that elevates it over a regular television show. Okay. It's the reason why War Games shouldn't just be an episode of Dynamite. It needs to be a pay-per-view. Right. So, with that said, and I know it's not called War Games, it's Blood and Guts, but
Blood and Guts.
But it's still to the point that I do like the lineup for both the men's and women's. I think that Chelsea Green, being Canadian, would be an interesting wrinkle if she were to win it. I think Tiffany Stratton would also be interesting if she were to win it because of her recent rise and then kind of flatten out. On the men's side, I'm all in on Carmelo Hayes. I would like to see him win it. And then, of course, the Bloodline Championship isn't being defended because the Bloodline is being built right now. So Cody has no reason to defend that title. Damian versus Seth Rollins for the actual World Heavyweight Championship is a thing. And of course, the big question is who cashes in that night. Do they save it for later, and so on. Surprised that there isn't a women's title match, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't see it. No.
Yeah. So now granted, it is this weekend, and we still haven't had SmackDown yet. So who knows? Your card subject to change, but it would be interesting. But I'm surprised that they don't have a women's title match because you have the women's Money in the Bank, which means that there possibly wouldn't be a cash in that night as well. So overall, it's definitely a pay-per-view with substance, and I think that's the difference between putting on 15 matches and settling 5 storylines. Not that I wouldn't enjoy 15 matches, but the 5 storylines are kind of like, okay, we're seeing where this can go. We're pontificating about the future. All right, cool. And also these ladder matches, they're going to eat up a lot of that time too. 30, 40 minutes a piece.
Minimum. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if we're going to dedicate an hour of this 3-hour show to the 2 matches, we can give everybody else 20 minutes a piece to do a thing. I think Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker, as far as the individual, that's the only one of the 2 singles matches there are. The other one's a 6-man tag. So, it's a lot. It's definitely a showcase match for both of those guys. Definitely a showcase match for Braun Breaker. How can he hang with Sami Zayn? That's going to be the test. Damian Priest versus Seth Rollins, I think that's going to be a solid match. Both of those guys are great workers. But as far as the match, the women's Money in the Bank is going to be fun. Money in the Bank is going to be fun. Chelsea Green being in Canada, yes, she's from the West Coast, but it's still Canada, and they don't care. And Chelsea Green is probably my favorite out of this pack. I like her gimmick. I like what she's bringing. She's doing something different. Naomi, really liked her in TNA. She was doing something different. Came back, we start feeling the glow again. Okay, fine. But yeah, give me Chelsea Green, give me Carmelo Hayes, and I'll be okay with that.
And to your point, and I'll end it on this, the fact that there isn't as of yet a women's title match for the event leads me to think that Chelsea is winning the Money in the Bank briefcase. Just so she can have that big moment as her winning the Money in the Bank briefcase. And just think of all the comedy skits she would have with the briefcase the entire time that she's holding it, only for her to lose it. Like maybe she loses it in real life, like in the actual storyline, and loses the match. Right. And it can, again, send her down that spiral where she's still freaking out being Chelsea Green. And I think that's very telling that there's no Bayley match, there's no Liv Morgan match yet as of right now. Because that means, for me at least, book it, Chelsea Green wins Money in the Bank. And I would love to see it, because if anyone's going to get the Canadian pop this weekend, it would be her. Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
Nope. I think we're good on that. I just the general, have a good 4th. Everybody out there, if you're Canadian, or Canadian adjacent, happy Canada Day. Of course, that was back on Monday. And then of course, Money in the Bank is this weekend up there in Toronto. Just, a lot of wrestling, really interesting time. AEW has a lot of ground to cover before the next pay-per-view, which I believe is at Wembley. I think Blood and Guts on Dynamite comes before then, but it's still there's the next pay-per-view is end of August. And then, of course, you have SummerSlam, which is going to be later in the summer. So that's another big pay-per-view for WWE later on. So an interesting time getting through the dog days of summer. But next thing you know, we'll be talking about how it's the end of July and we're going into SummerSlam season. So, it looks like some good stuff. The ratings and the naysayers and all that stuff notwithstanding, we got a lot of interesting things going on. And that's the thing. I'll give WWE credit, and I'll end up with this: is that even though the Bloodline Championship is not being defended, that's a segment of the show. You have the Money in the Bank matches and their ramifications segment of the show. You have the other World Heavyweight Championship match, and of course, which leads to the Money in the Bank shenanigans segment of the show. We don't know if the women's title match is going to happen. Maybe, maybe not. But we still have Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker, which is just a traditional title match. So a good show where it doesn't have to be a lot of filler. It's just straight to the point. 5 matches, 2.5, 3 hours. Get in, get out, go home. Have a good weekend.
And with that, have a good weekend. Have a happy 4th. Again, you can find us at Big Gold Belt Media, Big Gold Belt all over the internet on your Twitch or X, whatever you want to say, Twitch, Twitter, X, Instagram, BigGoldBelt.com, your one-stop shop for all things entertainment as well as wrestling. For Giant Crab Jamal and myself, Damon G, have a happy 4th. Be safe